So there's this wild situation unfolding with the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. Just picture this. Desiree Grace gets appointed as the federal prosecutor, but within just a few hours of taking up her new position, she gets fired. It turns out that federal judges in the state opted for her instead of President Donald Trump's choice, Alina Habba. Trump had put Habba in as the interim U.S. attorney back in March, but her 4-month term ran out today, and she was still waiting for Senate confirmation. Now, it's a bit of a mystery whether the Justice Department can ignore the district judge's decision. Now, let's dive into the whole courtroom drama that's making the rounds. There's a lot of chatter claiming that Trump tried to arrest a judge and that there was this wild eruption in the courtroom. Absolute chaos, they say. But honestly, it's hard to believe everything floating around because those specific claims aren't backed by any credible sources. Here's the deal. On March 9th, 2026, Trump didn't attend any hearings at all. There was no courtroom chaos, no attempt to arrest anyone, and certainly no physical confrontations anywhere. So, what really happened? Well, on that date, U.S. District Judge Matthew Brann made a ruling stating that 3 U.S. attorneys appointed by Trump, Lamprelu, Fox, and Fonteo were improperly put in place through a recess appointment, skirting around the Senate confirmation requirement outlined in the Constitution. He disqualified those 3 from handling active cases and warned about potential case dismissals and the release of dangerous criminals if the violations continued. He described the administration's legal arguments as more about leadership over law and dismissed them as a rhetorical smoke screen. Trump didn't take this lying down, though. He took to True Social to label Judge Brann as a fake judge obstructing justice for Americans and referred to him as a rogue lunatic. Following that, Trump's legal team jumped in and filed appeals. So there you have it, the full documented record of March 9th. No Trump in the courtroom, no uproar, and no arrest attempts. Just a ruling, an online reaction, and a legal team responding with appeals. Just your typical institutional shuffle. Really, honestly, it's a bit shocking how much drama is being stirred up over this situation. The so-called viral meltdown involving President Trump isn't accurately depicting what's happening. It's not an exaggeration when I say it feels more like a made-up story, one that twists a serious legal process into something sensational. Trump wasn't even there for the particular proceeding that resulted in an actual written ruling instead of any physical confrontations. On top of that, some of the clips that are making rounds are just recycled footage from the dismissed hush money trial, cleverly repackaged to create a new dramatic narrative and grab attention. There's a hope that this new role will help push forward a vision of putting America first and addressing the issues that truly matter. It's an interesting development, and they're eager to make significant changes. The real story behind this situation is actually quite important, and getting to the heart of it is way more helpful than the viral frenzy or the administration's dismissive attitude. On March 9th, a ruling was made that tackled a key constitutional issue. Can principal officers of the United States be appointed without Senate confirmation? The Constitution clearly says no. According to Article 2, Section 2, those appointments require Senate approval. This has been consistently interpreted by the federal courts as necessary for folks in big roles like U.S. attorneys. So the judge found that 3 U.S. attorneys were appointed during a recess and bypassed that requirement, declaring their appointments unconstitutional. As a result, he disqualified them from the cases they were working on. He also issued a serious warning that if the administration kept appointing prosecutors in this unconstitutional way, it could lead to case dismissals and even dangerous releases of criminals, because cases pursued by improperly appointed prosecutors have serious legal flaws right from the start. This warning isn't just talk. It's based on documented judicial analysis of what happens if this strategy continues, with courts across multiple districts recognizing the unconstitutionality. This ruling is just one example in a broader documented trend. Similar disqualifications are happening elsewhere, and there are ongoing appeals in numerous cases. Plus, the administration has faced over 650 losses in court, highlighting the extent of this problem. Now, I noticed that some videos circulating online featuring clips from the 2023 Hush Money trial use a specific trick to create dramatic content from actual historical footage. That trial was a real event with courtroom footage that was later dismissed. The footage is out there for anyone to see, showcasing actual moments from that trial. However, when you see it repackaged with 2026 dates and a tense narrative about March 9th, it's clear how the original content gets twisted. It's honestly hard to believe how some footage gets circulated. You know, the kind that tries to create a buzz by showing so-called courtroom drama, like claiming something wild happened on a specific date in March 2026. The thing is, it's crucial to check whether any trustworthy news outlet is reporting on the explosive events that these clips are suggesting. For the claims about the Trump courtroom drama and alleged meltdown on the 9th of March, the answer is a clear no. The New Times covered the important ruling and Reuters talked about the improper installation findings, but you won't find any credible sources saying there was a courtroom eruption or that there was an attempt to make an arrest because, quite frankly, it just didn't happen. What's even more interesting is how these viral clips circulate in the first place. There are plenty of people sharing this content who aren't just trying to mislead anyone. Many genuinely want to believe that the documented pattern of constitutional overreach is leading to real visible consequences. With over 600 court losses tied to these situations, folks are hoping for immediate accountability moments that they can actually share with others. It seems like these fabricated dramatic meltdowns are manufactured to create that instant visibility, and they try to link back to real accountability events, hoping that association gives them some credibility. The ruling about that important brand was indeed real and significant, but the contrived uproar in the courtroom just serves to make the actual judicial decision feel more dramatic than it really is, especially when it comes from behind closed doors without Trump being present. Every time someone shares that fake content, they are overshadowing the impactful ruling, which requires more than 30 seconds to explain. That's the unfortunate reality. And the responses from the so-called rogue judge really just highlight the documented antics associated with Trump. Trump's reaction is definitely worth a closer look, especially in how it plays out in political communication, even if it doesn't quite connect to the viral frenzy going around. He recently took to Truth Social to call Judge Brand a fake judge, claiming he's blocking justice for Americans. This kind of response is pretty typical for Trump whenever he faces unfavorable judicial decisions. It's a pattern we've seen through more than 650 court losses. It's almost like there's a template he sticks to. First, he labels the judge as partisan. Then he declares the ruling fake. And finally, he insists that real Americans are being blocked. This strategy of undermining the judicial system is all about delegitimizing the courts rather than actually dealing with the specific legal arguments at hand. When Brand pointed out issues with how prosecutors were installed, Trump labeled him a rogue lunatic and had his legal team file appeals right away. It's interesting how this three-step approach, characterize, respond politically, litigate, has become the go-to move for handling significant losses in court. It's not just a meltdown, it's more like a well-thought-out strategy for communication and litigation. Now let's dive into what that Brand ruling actually signifies. Understanding the implications of the Appointments Clause violation and its constitutional relevance is crucial. It's certainly more important than a single procedural ruling from a district court. And while it might not be as dramatic as someone trying to arrest a judge in court, grasping where it sits on that spectrum is essential for getting the real accountability story right. The Appointments Clause found in Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution plays a key role in structuring accountability within our system. It mandates Senate confirmation for principal officers, ensuring that there's a check on executive power when it comes to who gets to wield federal law enforcement authority. If a president could appoint prosecutors without the Senate's approval, it would severely undermine the oversight of politically sensitive investigations. I came across some pretty alarming findings about how things have been operating in New Jersey. It turns out there's this accountability loophole that allows law enforcement to act at the whim of the executive branch instead of sticking to the rules laid out in the Constitution. Brand pointed this out specifically, noting that certain individuals were put in place to handle prosecutions like Lamparillo, Fox, and Fonteo using a method that skips the necessary checks designed to keep the executive branch from having unchecked power over law enforcement. This isn't just a minor slip-up. It's a serious judicial finding. The administration has been installing federal prosecutors in ways that aren't constitutional, especially when it comes to targeting political rivals. The fallout from this: we're seeing case dismissals, criminals being released when they shouldn't be, and a shaky foundation of how prosecutions are handled. All risks that Brand highlighted could arise from this sidestepping of the rules. Then there's this troubling report from the New York Times on February 18th, which documented over 52 violations in immigration detention cases in New Jersey. That finding fits right in line with Brand's ruling, showcasing a clear pattern of constitutional overreach happening across different areas. You start to see that these violations aren't just random failures by individual agents pushing the limits of their authority. There's a systemic issue at play here, a documented pattern of ignoring federal court orders. The Department of Justice even ordered a review on February 18th due to these documented violations. As of March 13th, there haven't been any new findings released from that review yet, but the 52 violations are very much recorded in federal court and in the New York Times reports. They're not being challenged by the administration with any counter evidence. Instead, these acknowledged violations point to ongoing judicial oversight concerning how immigration detention is being run, and they align closely with the earlier findings about unconstitutional prosecutors. We're seeing the executive branch operating outside of constitutional and judicial requirements. And while courts are calling out these violations, the administration seems to be pushing back with political spin rather than addressing the core issues. It's honestly surprising to see how the courts have been standing firm on constitutional limits lately. Just think about it. There was this appeal court decision on March 11th that put a stop to the Trump administration's attempt to halt funding for the Hudson Tunnel. That's just one of 3 significant rulings from that week that reflect this ongoing trend of judicial accountability. Earlier on March 9th, there was a ruling against an unconstitutional prosecutor. And back on February 18th, there were over 52 documented immigration detention violations. So in just 1 week, we had 3 judicial findings touching on different policy areas across 3 courts. That's a clear pattern of the court stepping in and saying that the executive branch has been overreaching its authority. If you add it all up, the total number of court losses for the administration has climbed to over 650. This consistent pushback from federal judges is the real story about judicial accountability, and honestly, no need for any courtroom drama or wild arrests. What we're seeing instead is a systematic rejection of actions that overstep constitutional boundaries across various sectors. Now, what really stands out is the warning about case dismissals and risky criminal releases that Brand pointed out. This seems to stem from the administration's unconstitutional way of installing prosecutors, which is worth a closer look. You've got situations where political retaliation cases are being affected, like those involving Smartmatic and Letitia James. These unconstitutionally installed prosecutors have made the cases they built legally shaky. Defendants can challenge these cases just based on how these prosecutors were appointed, regardless of the case's merits. The whole revenge prosecution strategy was meant to intimidate. But it turns out that this constitutional bypass makes those very cases susceptible to dismissal. There's a certain irony in how the strategy backfired. The situation with prosecutors being placed outside the normal confirmation process has created a shaky legal situation, making these politically motivated cases likely to fall apart. It's kind of wild actually considering the implications for real defendants facing genuine charges. Their cases could seriously be compromised due to these prosecutors being installed unconstitutionally. And it's not just happening in New Jersey. The same pattern of questionable prosecutor installations is showing up in other districts as well, pointing to a broader problem with the appointments clause. It turns out that this whole bypass strategy wasn't limited to just one state. It was a coordinated effort to install prosecutors across several districts using the same constitutional loophole. Meanwhile, courts in other areas are looking into similar issues regarding how these prosecutors were put in place, and the Third Circuit is likely to rule on this matter soon, which could set a significant precedent for these overlapping examinations. The reality is that this legal vulnerability affects every political retaliation case tied to unconstitutionally installed prosecutors, not just those in New Jersey. What's more, the entire strategy built by the administration relies on a constitutional foundation that federal courts are now recognizing as invalid. This finding has broader implications that extend well beyond just 3 prosecutors in New Jersey and even the cases mentioned in the ruling a while back. It operates within a political context filled with rising pressures like low approval ratings and strong opposition to the Iran war, not to mention the ongoing investigations and impeachment actions. The Brand ruling adds to this mounting pressure by confirming that there are unconstitutional installations of prosecutors, which only complicates matters further. I want to clarify a few things around the recent buzz, especially about the claims surrounding courtroom events and the circumstances involving Trump. Let's get into it. First off, the whole scene about a meltdown in the courtroom and an attempt to arrest the judge is completely made up. There's nothing credible backing that story. Trump wasn't even at the hearing on March 9th, so there was absolutely no uproar or any attempts to arrest anyone. The so-called Brand ruling was actually just a written decision issued from Chambers, and his response appeared on Truth Social afterward. Meanwhile, his legal team has filed appeals, but there was no dramatic confrontation at all. Some of the footage circulating is actually old clips from the 2023 Hush Money trial, which was dismissed and has no links to the March 9th ruling. It's been rehashed and misrepresented in a misleading way. No serious news outlet reported any of that nonsense because it simply didn't happen. So it's worth debunking whenever you encounter it. On the other hand, the Brand ruling itself is very real and significant. It's a crucial finding in terms of judicial accountability. During this second term, we saw 3 New Jersey attorneys disqualified due to violations involving the Appointments Clause, which highlights some serious issues like leadership over law and the risks of dangerous criminal releases. Trump referred to one of the judges involved as a rogue lunatic, and of course his team has filed appeals against that ruling. Now, what's important about this ruling is its constitutional weight. It basically determined that the prosecutors involved were unconstitutionally placed in their roles to pursue cases regarded as political retaliation through a strategy intended to bypass the necessary confirmation checks the Constitution mandates. This means these political retaliation cases now have a shaky legal foundation because of that unconstitutional setup. Moreover, there are further findings I should mention, like the documented violations of immigration detention court orders that were noted on February 18th and the Hudson Tunnel funding halt reversal that happened on March 11th. These are the second and third significant judicial accountability findings from the same week, showing a clear pattern in what's been happening. So, here's the scoop. On March 9th, 2026, there was no courtroom drama when it came to Trump. He wasn't trying to arrest anyone, nor did he even show up for a hearing. What actually happened was quite a different story. The Brand ruling was just a written decision, and Trump took to Truth Social to call Brand all sorts of names, like a rogue lunatic and a fake judge. His legal team went ahead and filed some appeals. Now, what's really interesting is that Brand pointed out some serious issues with how 3 New Jersey attorneys were appointed. He found them unconstitutionally installed, meaning they were disqualified from active cases. Brand also warned that their way of doing things could lead to case dismissals and potentially let some dangerous criminals go free. He called the administration's legal arguments nothing but a rhetorical smokescreen. Quite the way to put it. In the bigger picture, we've got over 650 court losses for the administration during this entire second term, which is a clear pattern of judicial accountability. There have been plenty of findings across multiple courts this week alone. Plus, there were also over 50 documented violations of immigration detention court orders back on February 18th. Just last week, funding for the Hudson Tunnel project was reinstated after being halted. This isn't just about isolated cases. It speaks to a broader trend of constitutional overreach being pushed back consistently by federal courts. There's no need for meltdowns or any dramatic confrontations. Just a clear documented pattern of accountability that's building up to some significant midterm accountability. Every legal finding, casualty, and spike in gas prices contributing to that. In the end, the viral content might promise drama that never really unfolded, but the actual story reveals important constitutional accountability that far outweighs any made-up confrontations. The situation is definitely heating up, and it's shaping the political and legal landscape as we move toward November. There's a lot happening that doesn't require anyone to throw a tantrum in the courtroom to create a ripple effect. Thanks for sticking with me through this. If you're still here, I really appreciate you watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and sign up for the newsletter. We're all in for a ride as the struggle for judicial accountability unfolds through our Constitution. I'll catch you next time as we keep track of all the developments coming our